got Mr. David Sterling is with us. David, thanks for coming on, sir.
Thanks for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Yes, sir. So, David, I guess the last time we spoke, you were, I believe, a candidate for Attorney General at one time, and now you are running as for the Arkansas Supreme Court. So, congratulations on throwing your hat in the ring.
Well, thanks so much. I do appreciate it. It has been I guess it was 4 years ago when I was on this program when I was running for Attorney General and got into. I guess it was on the Republican ticket back then and everything. This is a nonpartisan race here, so no party affiliation here. But Leslie and I got into and had Patricia Nation in there as well, and no one got a majority in the election, so we had to do a statewide runoff where everybody had to go back to the polls all across the state 3 weeks later and select between us. And afterwards, I endorsed Leslie and wrote her a check, and then later on she went ahead and beat Nate Steele in that race, and now she's been doing a great job as our Attorney General.
So you mentioned, David, about the nonpartisan relationship with our judges in our elections, and that makes doing interviews with you guys extremely difficult. I will just say, and that's makes my job harder. So whatever, that's a first world problem. But I would just say, so how do we know? How do we know your judicial philosophy? Let's talk about this. What do you think about the Constitution? Would you describe yourself as an originalist, or would you describe yourself as somebody who, thinks that the Constitution is maybe a living, breathing document that changes over time? What are your thoughts on
that? My thoughts are just that. I do believe in originalism. I believe in textualism. I'm someone that really takes the Constitution very seriously and understands the separation of powers and the checks and balances that are in the Constitution. But yeah, I'm an originalist in the same way. I've read a lot of Scalia's works on this. There's a number of Supreme Court justices, such as Neil Gorsuch and Samuel Alito, who have talked about, Clarence Thomas, who have talked about originalism and textualism, and they try to adhere to that, and that's what I'm offering to the Supreme Court.
So what makes you want to, what makes you want to be a Supreme Court justice in terms of, what made you want to run for this particular seat? Because this is, isn't it, it's the current justice you're running against, Courtney Goodson, right? You're running for her seat, correct?
Correct, that's right. Well, I'm running for the Supreme Court because I think that Arkansans deserve a justice who will serve with integrity and who has the right judicial philosophy. I want to use my experience and knowledge to serve the state where I grew up. And I'm a lifelong Arkansan, practicing law here for over 20 years in both private and public capacities. And I've also served as a special justice on the Supreme Court a couple of times. And my wife and I have been married for 26 years. My wife, Deanie. We have a wonderful daughter, Elizabeth Ann. And, I think that, I think I bring the right values to the Supreme Court, the right experience, the right values, and integrity. I think those are really key.
Can I ask you a judicial question on the and I don't know if you can answer this. Again, this is why it's really sometimes it's hard to interview. It's hard to interview judicial candidates because they don't want to. Sometimes you guys can't comment because you may be ruling on the case at a later date or something. And then, of course, the nonpartisan thing, makes it kind of hard. Again, you did run as a Republican the last time, so that gives us some reasonable way to interpret, I think, how you would govern, and being an originalist certainly is good. There is one thing about this upcoming tort reform amendment that the people are going to be voting on, and one of the reasons I don't support it, even though I might support tort reform, is because you mentioned separation of powers. I think it blurs the lines because it's going to give the legislature the ability to set rules of evidence in a courtroom. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that needs to happen, or is that a blurring of the separation of powers, in your opinion?
Well,
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for being with us. This is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine. We're here for another day, and we appreciate you starting the beginning of your day with us here. The phone number to call us or text us, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Got a lot of news to get to this morning, and I got to tell you, let's see, we got Senator Brian King coming up at 7:33 this morning, so he'll be back on the program. And I'm sure it'll come up talking about this John Woods case, the public corruption trial of John Woods kicking off yesterday. They started going over a jury list. I don't think any of the jury was selected, but I think several people were dismissed. Newspaper reporting most of them because of personal conflicts and things like that. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of jury is assembled during this process. Again, the telephone number, 870-275-9799. I want to get to that story here in just a little bit. Also, there is a follow-up story from the one over at Conduit for Action that we covered yesterday concerning whether or not the task force on taxes was Governor Asa Hutchinson's idea. The first article obviously corrected the record that the brainchild of Asa Hutchinson, it was his brainchild, this task force on taxes. And so when they start talking about ending exemptions to raise taxes, he's trying to distance himself from the task force now because he has a primary opponent. But if you actually go back and understand history, a very recent history, this was all Governor Hutchinson's idea. And so to distance himself or try to attempt to say, no, that's the legislature and not me, is just not factually accurate because, I was there. We were at the Marble Palace when he gave his little speech that, placated a conservative tax proposal. Okay, we'll talk more about that as well. Let's start with the whiteboard this morning, though. So for the week, we have a brand new whiteboard. Yesterday it was blank, and, I asked you guys, what you thought. We had some good suggestions, but I will say this. This is pretty much where we are demanding honest government. The whiteboard for the rest of the week is going to say, we want honest government. We want honest government. Now, imagine that. Who doesn't want honest government? This is a very bipartisan goal here, isn't it? The Democrats clearly, no one's gonna go out and say we want dishonest government. No one's gonna go out and say we want graft, or illegal activity from our politicians. No one's gonna go out and say that. We just want an honest government. And this is, I really feel like from a limited government conservative standpoint, this is kind of a digression. This is not where we wanted to be. Let's see, 8 years into Republicans making gains. 8 years into Republicans making gains in Arkansas and starting to change the state from a Democrat state to a Republican state. This is not where we wanted to be, right? We would have championed this cause, you would have thought, when the Democrats were in control. But now we're not talking about, I feel like, Allen Iverson. We're talking about practice. We're not talking about limiting government. We're not talking about the benefits of the benefits or pitfalls of a welfare program for the truly needy, or those or one that's not the true for a welfare program not for the truly needy. We're not talking about where to make cuts. We're not talking about where to get spending under control. We're not talking really in a serious way, other than where we can carefully craft the language about tax cuts. We're not seriously talking about any of this, any of the stuff that is really important to the fiscal conservatives, the people who understand that a big government is going to has the power to make more people do things by force, and it's not about voluntary cooperation in a free market. We're not able to really have, at this point, and I'm just being honest with you, because of our leadership, we're not able to have a real debate over whether or not the government should get involved and give away all this taxpayer money to pick winners and losers of companies in China. We're not really, we talk about it here, but we at this point, the corruption in our own government here in Arkansas is so bad, we have to step back from all of that and just say, boy, wouldn't it be nice if we just had an honest government? Meaning, if you're gonna support, let's say, something that I disagree with, right? Let's say that you want to expand. Let's say you want to be one of these wacko liberals. It's like, we want free college tuition for every Arkansas child or something, or every Arkansas senior. Like, okay, I would disagree with that vehemently, but, it'd just be nice if you're honest and you don't somehow get a kickback. You know what I mean? Like, I disagree. I think, I don't believe in socialism, but, man, it'd be nice if we just had honest people in there, This is where we are right now. That's why the whiteboard says what it does. And I want you to understand that by taking this line, in many ways, we're acknowledging that the conservative agenda has been put on hold because Republicans in power, in the leadership, okay, be clear here, in the leadership, are now making excuses for why, their campaign promises just can't work. They're making excuses for why the reforms that we voted for, that are embedded in the Republican Party platform, just, we'll implement the reforms, but we still got to make the Marble Palace establishment and the people that run things down there, we can't rock their boat too much, right? So we'll try to do it, but we'll snip around the edges. And, of course, we're going to tell you that snipping around the edges is reforming the whole thing. We're going to package it like, oh my goodness, can you believe these Reagan-esque reforms that we have just done? Even though we're sniffing around the edges, we're going to try to sell it to you like we have gone down there and we have completely upended the status quo. And that's what's really frustrating. Again, honest government would just be, for example, an honest government would be that Asa would stop trying to appear conservative and just run on his record. Run on the record of not allowing legislators to run a bathroom bill. Run on that record. Run on the record of being against the sanctuary campus bill. Run on the record of being against the American law and American courts bill. Run on your record instead of trying to now pretend that you were the first to stand up to Barack Obama's federal direction on restroom assignments in our public schools, when you fought tooth and nail against any legislator that actually wanted to try to at least just bring it up for debate in a bill. But instead, and that's the thing. How we have a parody that says it's part of a parody. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office because they supported a socialist health care program, right? You remember that line in the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language parody? It was in the hypothetical scenario. The reason so many Republicans lost is because they were honest in their campaign mailers, and they defended their vote for the Obamacare private option. They no longer do that. Instead, they take the conservative position and lie and say, no, it's not Obamacare. And ever since they've made that conscious shift in the narrative to just lie and say, no, it's not Obamacare, they've done better. And that's what they've had to do because, you know, they want to hold on to their power. So not only do I want honest government, like, you know, I don't want John Woods to, go down there, carve a financial niche out for himself and then get kickbacks, or Mike and Neal or Jake Files or Orrin Paris or Randall Shelton or Rusty Cranford, who tried to hire a guy to kill another lobbyist in New Jersey that was going to testify against him. Not only do I want all that to stop, boy, wouldn't it just be nice if the politicians would just have the guts to stand by their record. And, you know, in Asa Hutchinson's case, that does mean he gets to put on a mailer that the income tax is reduced because, you know, that was part of his agenda by, you know, X amount of dollars or whatever. Yeah, he does get to say that. But then he also needs to address the fact that he won't quit spending more and more money. He can say all day long that he cut your taxes by $100 million, which is not any money at all, by the way. But he can say that all day long. But in the end, we say, okay, you claim to cut our taxes by $100 million, even though you raised the tire tax, you created a new tax on tires, you created a digital downloads tax, you used the veterans in order to get more money coming into the government, and you've increased spending $600 million. Now, you answer this. Has the government grown under your leadership? Has it stayed the same size, or has it gotten smaller? And by any, I believe, objective marker, it's grown, because if spending grows, it's certainly, and we are also in a budget crisis. We can't fund our prisons or roads properly because we've over leveraged ourselves, and now they're needing all this money for health care, $2 billion a year. Why? Because the hospitals are going to close if we don't, and yet there are hospitals all across the state are under construction, building these brand new Taj Mahal buildings, which, hey, I'm, good for them. But I mean, let's not pretend there's something weird if you go from being this close to close to just building and expanding constantly. I mean, it's basically the color of a hospital. You see the hospital sign, it's blue, road sign, hospital this way. The actual color of the hospitals now are orange because of all the construction fence and all the construction stuff going on, the cones. It needs to change to an orange sign because they're constantly improving their buildings, and they're all getting taxpayer money. All right, we're going to take a break. We just want honest government. We just want honest government. That's what we want. That's what the whiteboard says all week. We're going to tackle this John Woods, 160 witnesses. 160 witness names are on the list for the public corruption trial of John Woods. We'll talk about that when we come back.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst. How are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal.
Ethics.
Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody. Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, looking at some documents. Sorry about that. Looking at some documents coming in, it's just amazing when you start looking at the consulting firms. Some consulting firms, they were set up by this attorney or that attorney. Yeah, John Woods. What is that? Is it Titan Consulting? Yeah. Interesting. You know, with this public corruption trial of John Woods getting underway, they're in the middle of the jury selection. It'll be interesting to see what other documents we get from the court now that, when this thing gets rolling. What are we going to learn? What are we going to see? It's crazy. We've come a long way from the article that was posted back in November of 2015. An article by Brenda Vassar Taylor, The Cure for Influence Peddling in Arkansas. And I'm just going to read you the beginning of the article. Just listen to this. This is from 2015. During the last few years, as Arkansas has increasingly elected Republicans to manage the people's business, it may appear to many that influence peddling and public corruption is on the rise. History shows there has always been this corruption on the other side of the aisle, but new, shocking, and sensational revelations may leave voters wondering, can we really improve our lot with the vote? The answer is a resounding yes. The article, folks, goes on to number one at the very top of this article. It mentions Senator John Woods. Then it mentions the Democrat Martha Schaffner that was getting kickbacks in a pie box. Then it mentions Judge Mike Maggio, who pled guilty for lowering a bribe for $5.2 million judgment that he lowered in exchange for like $10,000. There's a nursing home. And see, the number 5 on the list is Chief of Staff to the Governor Michael Lamoureux, and him getting $120,000 from a 501c4 nonprofit that was funded by lobbyists that raised $141,000 that year. I mean, you start going down the list here, and you realize at the very end of the list, you know who's on it? Senator Jake Files. So I want you to understand, number one, gosh, how on the money Conduit for Action has been, in many ways, the lone voice saying, hey, what's going on here? There's a lot of corruption. This is the article, though. We should go back and retitle this article, The Cure for Influence Peddling. I mean, it's not even influence peddling anymore. We're talking about black and white illegal activity where the politicians are laundering the money. It's coming back to them to enrich themselves. We're now talking about, the cure for, illegal activity. I don't know. That's not a good headline. Influence peddling sounds a lot better, but you get my point. It's like, oh, my goodness. I mean, this was back in November of 2015. I just want you to understand how everybody knew this stuff was going on. But fast forward, it's now 2018, and what do we have? The number one guy on this list, John Woods, his trial started yesterday. I want you to think about that for a second. We've known about this. We've known something was going on, weird and fishy, at least since November 10th of 2015, but everybody else knew. If you talk to anybody, they all knew something weird was going on. Okay? We also have Jake Files, who pled guilty. He's on this list. He pled guilty this year. You have Micah Neal, who's not on this list, but Micah Neal pled guilty, right? You have lobbyists who are ensnared in this. You have Rusty Cranford, who tried to have a guy killed. I mean, that's like, that's so far out there. It really is. It was it's shocking to me. I think it's shocking to most people. It's like, okay, yeah, these people are just in it to make some money, but good grief, once they're caught, who knew? I mean, who knew it was going to be some sort of murder, she wrote, Matlock style? Well, we got to murder that witness. We got to try to murder that witness. I mean, this is just some really outlandish stuff here. But if you go back and listen, go Google search. Just go read this article. The Cure for Influence Peddling in Arkansas at conduitforaction.org. It was back in November 10th of 2015. And this stuff is crazy. And I mean, if you really just listen to the summary on John Woods. Okay, this is before the indictment. And again, the public corruption trial of John Woods started yesterday. But I want you to listen to this summary of John Woods. Timeline of influence peddling in Arkansas. January 2013, Senator John Woods. During the general session, Senator Woods was the sole Senate sponsor of an ethics amendment, Issue 3, to the Arkansas Constitution passed by the voters in November 2014, which, in spite of its title, doubled terms for the state House and Senate, increased legislative salaries by 2.5 times, while claiming to reform ethics between lobbyists and legislators. Oh my goodness. Just the first paragraph alone. Claiming to reform ethics between lobbyists and legislators while this guy was getting paid by a lobbyist through a consulting firm for giving general improvement funds to the place where it needed to go. The story goes on. Though he had the endorsement of Governor Asa Hutchinson, as evidenced by an October 20th, 2015 fundraiser for Senate District 7, Woods withdrew as a candidate for re-election to the Senate seat on November 7th, 2015. After setting up his successor for his Senate race, Representative Lance Eads, with his friend, and then it keeps going. Woods stated as the cause for this sudden withdrawal as what is obviously also sudden desire to spend more time with family. And this is just really surreal to me. A 2015 article, and now his public corruption trial started yesterday. Back in just a moment. that makes doing interviews with you guys extremely difficult. I will just say, and that makes my job harder. So whatever, that's a first world problem. But I would just say, so how do we know? How do we know your judicial philosophy? Let's talk about this. What do you think about the Constitution? Would you describe yourself as an originalist, or would you describe yourself as somebody who, thinks that the Constitution is maybe a living, breathing document that changes over time? What are your thoughts on
that? My thoughts are just that. I do believe in originalism. I believe in textualism. I'm someone that really takes the Constitution very seriously and understands the separation of powers and the checks and balances that are in the Constitution. But yeah, I'm an originalist in the same way. I've read a lot of Scalia's works on this. There's a number of Supreme Court justices, such as Neil Gorsuch and Samuel Alito, who have talked about, Clarence Thomas, who have talked about originalism and textualism, and they try to adhere to that, and that's what I'm offering to the Supreme Court.
So what makes you want to, what makes you want to be a Supreme Court justice in terms of, what made you want to run for this particular seat? Because this is, isn't it, it's the current justice you're running against, Courtney Goodson, right? You're running for her seat, correct?
Correct, that's right. Well, I'm running for the Supreme Court because I think that Arkansans deserve a justice who will serve with integrity and who has the right judicial philosophy. I want to use my experience and knowledge to serve the state where I grew up. And I'm a lifelong Arkansan, practicing law here for over 20 years in both private and public capacities. And I've also served as a special justice on the Supreme Court a couple of times. And my wife and I have been married for 26 years. My wife, Deanie. We have a wonderful daughter, Elizabeth Ann. And, I think that, I think I bring the right values to the Supreme Court, the right experience, the right values, and integrity. I think those are really key.
Can I ask you a judicial question on the and I don't know if you can answer this. Again, this is why it's really sometimes it's hard to interview. It's hard to interview judicial candidates because they don't want to. Sometimes you guys can't comment because you may be ruling on the case at a later date or something. And then, of course, the nonpartisan thing, makes it kind of hard. Again, you did run as a Republican the last time, so that gives us some reasonable way to.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
You can tell. It's like I can tell that my allergies, the pollen has been activated across the state. There was a decree. Nature decreed it. The pollen has been activated, folks. And I want to just tell you, I'm not saying it's a miracle drug or anything, but if you really want to combat your allergies, I'll tell you what works for me. And I haven't done it today, but oregano oil. Get yourself some oregano oil if you want. And I tell this to everybody I can because I used to take like a Zyrtec every single day. And I don't at all anymore. Matter of fact, I don't take anything until I feel the allergies coming on, and then I just dose with massive amounts of oregano oil. It's pretty spicy. You got to drink a lot of water with it. You got to put it under your tongue, or you don't want to put it directly on your tongue. But anyway, there's all kinds of brands out there, with oregano oil. Some of it's cut with olive oil to make it a little bit more palatable. But I'm just telling you, this isn't an ad or anything, but because there's all kinds of brands out there. But if you want, I would seriously look into it. Go to a health food store or something, get you some oregano oil, because it really does amazing things. Okay, just one before I get to the 160 witness article. I want to say one more thing about this old 2015 article, where it had John Woods at the top of the list, the cure for influence peddling in Arkansas. The last sentence of that paragraph about John Woods' sudden desire to spend more time with family back in November of 2015. Whether there are additional reasons why Senator Woods stepped away from this Senate race, time will tell. Well, now the public corruption trial of John Woods has commenced, and here is Doug Thompson's take on this. 160 witnesses is the headline. I think there was a different headline in the actual print version. Let me see here. Yeah, the print version that I see, jury selection process starts in Woods' corruption trial. On the online story, we have a different title, but that's just what happens. So, there's Woods waving at the camera. Let's see, photo taken. When was this photo taken? April the 4th. Potential witnesses for the corruption trial of former state senator John Woods, Doug Thompson writes, include at least 2 of the state's constitutional officers and 22 current or former legislators. Wow. About 70 prospective jurors were both shown and read 160 names Monday from merged prosecution and defense lists of witnesses who might be called. Now, the judge in this case, again, U.S. District Judge Timothy Brooks, who I believe has done a good job handling this case so far, folks, because he, I was under the impression that John Woods was going to walk because of the FBI agent and what he did with those recordings. Doug Thompson reports that no jurors were picked Monday, although at least a dozen were excused, 3 for knowing someone on the list, meaning the witnesses. The potential witnesses. Skipping down, let's read about this real quick. Potential witnesses named so far include State Auditor Andrea Lee, State Treasurer Dennis Milligan, and State Republican Party Chairman Doyle Webb, according to the list. Lawmakers in office who were on the list who steered money to Ecclesia College. Now, keep in mind the word is steer. Okay. Why do they say steer? Well, it's because their defense go, I didn't really give the money. The Western Planning District gave, the Central Arkansas Planning District. They're the ones that gave the money. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous to even suggest that. We have been over this a million times on this program. We've talked about the corruption. We've had Mike Wilson on. There's a reason that the Supreme Court ruled it's unconstitutional. It's because you guys are still doing the exact thing that the Supreme Court said you couldn't do the last time. Lawmakers in office who were on the list who did steer at least some grant money to Ecclesia are Senator Bart Hester, Republican from Cave Springs, Representative Bob Ballinger, Republican from Berryville, Representative Charlie Collins, Republican from Fayetteville, Representative Janet De La Rosa, Republican from Rogers, Representative Jim Dotson, Republican from Bentonville, and Representative Stephen Meeks, a Republican from Greenbrier. Their former representatives, Randy Alexander, Republican Springdale, was also named on the list and steered a grant to Ecclesia. Now, let's just be clear. It doesn't, just because you steered a grant, that doesn't mean anything, because this was it was the hot thing to do. It's a Christian college. And this is, hey, steer money towards this place or whatever. It's what Ecclesia did after they got the money that is the problem here. Okay. Now, lawmakers in office and on the potential witness list who did not grant money to Ecclesia are Senator Alan Clark, Senator Brian King, Representative Dan Douglas, Senator Scott Flippo, and Representative Trevor Drown. They did not steer any money to Ecclesia, but they're on the witness list. So that's pretty interesting. And then we have former lawmakers on the list include House Speaker Bill Stovall and current State Finance Director Duncan Baird, who's a former state representative as well. So this is where it's interesting, because I want to back up here, because last week, of course, you had Orrin Paris III, who has been charged here, pleading guilty to transferring $50,000 of the $200,000 in grant money from Woods and Neal to Randall Shelton. Then Randall Shelton sent $40,000 of the money to Woods as a kickback, according to Paris's plea. Shelton's defense will argue the money was a loan that had nothing to do with the Ecclesia grant. His attorneys have said, "Are you serious?" Randall Shelton's attorneys are going to argue that the $40,000 was a loan and had nothing to do with Ecclesia. With a straight face, they're going to argue this. Okay. With a straight face. They're going to argue this. That's funny. Okay, let's see. Keep going here. Let's scroll back down, because there's a interesting Doug Thompson has, well, I feel like Doug Thompson has made a mistake or has omitted something in his piece because he talks about $100,000. Joe, go to the paragraph right there. Highlight 10 current or former legislators. So you see 10 current or former legislators directed state grants to Ecclesia from 2013 through March 2015. Totaling $617,500. The figure doesn't include $100,000 the college received where records are unclear who gave the money. Scrolling all the way down to the end of the article, third paragraph from the end, again, Doug Thompson writes, another $100,000 from the fund to Ecclesia came through the West Central Arkansas Planning and Development District in Hot Springs. The only documents from legislators provided by that district in support of the grants came from Woods. So, scrolling back up, 10 current. Listen to this. Go up to the last art, the other one. The figure doesn't include $100,000 the college received where records are unclear who gave the money. Well, we have the records. We have the document, and the document exists because of a subpoena. And it's not fuzzy or blurry at all. It's quite clear. By the way, it's quite clear. So we have the Western Planning and Development District documents. We got a lot of them, as a matter of fact. And on page, hang on a second, let me back up here. Joe, go ahead and throw this up there so the audience can see who are watching at facebook.com/Conduit News. If you go to page, go ahead, Joe, just so everybody knows where we got these documents, and go to page 42. You see here on page 42, please return original to U.S. Attorney's Office, United States District Court for the Western District of Arkansas, subpoena to testify before a grand jury. Okay? That's where this document comes from. Just so everybody knows, this is a result of a subpoena. So these documents are out there. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure the Democrat Gazette's the one that originally had the documents that, before they were released to the public. Obviously the court had them beforehand. All right, so So that's where the documents come from. Now go up to page 21, Joe. Go back up to page 21 on this thing. I'm following along with you. And actually, let's make it page 20. Let's start on page 20 instead. It's a letter. From Dwayne Pratt, the executive director of the West Central Arkansas Planning and Development District, dated November 25th of 2013, to Orrin Paris III of Ecclesia College. A response about a project award from 2013 General Improvement Funds. Dear Mr. Paris, the Board of Directors of West Central Arkansas Planning and Development District is pleased to inform you that your your General Improvement Fund grant application has been approved. This funding was provided to the West Central to West Central through the Arkansas General Assembly Act 639, Ecclesia College. It's for property acquisition, and it's for $50,000. Well, that's $50,000 of the $100,000 that Doug Thompson is saying we don't know where it came from. Scrolling down to the next page, 22, and we see, here we go, Western Central Arkansas Planning and Development District, GIF Grant Program Application Fact Sheet, Ecclesia College, and we scroll down and we see again $50,000. The total project budget to buy the land was $565,000. Okay, and we see Orrin Paris III's signature there. But look at this, State Senator Michael Lamoureux. Look at that. So this $50,000 that went to Ecclesia came from Michael Lamoureux. His name is right there on the document. It's as clear as day for this new construction. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. This was December of 2013. $50,000 for Michael Lamoureux to Ecclesia College. Okay, so then let's go to pages 33. Okay, let's do this all over again. Go to page 33 of this document. We see another letter. Again, this time dated March of 2014 to Mr. Orrin Paris. Dear Mr. Paris, the board of directors, blah, 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 we're giving you the money. And as we scroll down, another $50,000. Well, now $50,000 plus $50,000, that's $100,000. And look at the bottom of the letter, right? Look at the bottom of the letter, and we missed this on the last letter. It was there too. You know who? Look who's carbon copied on the letter. Senator Michael Lamoureux is carbon copied on the letter right there. So a letter to Orrin Paris saying you're getting $50,000, and they want to make Michael Lamoureux aware of it. Back in 2014. Scrolling down to the next page, we see a similar document received February 28th, 2014, and again, there's Michael Lamoureux's name. $50,000 for the same project to buy the land. $50,000 plus $50,000 is $100,000. So when this is why it's very strange to me. It could just be an oversight. This is a very confusing case, and every time you mention John Wood's name in this public corruption trial, there's a part of every article that's like, John Woods is being charged with money laundering. John Woods is, whatever. They have to give you the rundown of the case, and I'm sure it gets exhausting and tiring. I'm sure some of these reporters just kind of have the, like permanently copied to their clipboard with every story they write. But if you go back to the story, Joe, and we read here that 10 current and former legislators directed state grants to Ecclesia College from 2013 through March of 2015, totaling $617,000. The figure doesn't include $100,000 the college received where records are unclear who gave the money. Michael Lamoureux gave the money. I just showed you the documents. Could just be an oversight by Doug Thompson. He could have forgotten. I think they reported on this previously. If it is just an oversight, that's fine. I just wanted to let you guys know that it's not unclear who gave that $100,000. Michael Lamoureux gave it. His name is carbon copied on the letters to Orrin Paris. Michael Lamoureux, Governor Asa Hutchinson's former chief of staff. So you need to. I don't know. I don't know. I guess I was expecting Michael Lamoureux to get a shout out in this article based on that, and he did not. But you know what? There are many more stories to come about this because the public corruption trial of John Woods has commenced, and we will see what transpires from here on out. Coming up, we're going to be talking about this brand new Conduit for Action article, follow up on the initial one about whether or not the tax task force was Ace's brainchild, trying to distance himself from his own idea now that they're talking about ending tax exemptions. What is ending a tax exemption, you might ask? Well, that would be a tax increase on a specific population. We're going to take a break. Back in just a moment.
If you're like me, You believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
It's a PHP parody.
Hey, man, you got any of that marble rock?
Yeah, I've got the hookup.
Thanks. I need a fix real bad. I'm itching to grow some government.
How much you need?
I'm gonna need a taxpayer's dime bag.
No problem, sir. 1 taxpayer dime of marble rock. Enjoy.
Thanks, man. They don't call it Little Rock for nothing. Am I right?
Did you know your state representative or state senator may be addicted to growing government? The drug is called marble rock, and too much of it will cause marble fever. Watch for the warning signs. Does your legislator suddenly display a lack of humility when faced with basic questions? Does he or she suddenly develop hubris and pride that was not present during the campaign for office? These are signs they might be smoking the terrible drug, marble rock. The solution? Detox. Vote for detox. Vote to send them home for their own good. Warning! Some politicians once voted out of office will not go home and stay in Little Rock to get their fix by lobbying, also known as the Burris Syndrome.
PHP parody.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
And nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Yeah, you forget that lobbyists can be addicted to the marble rock as well. You know, you take your first hit of marble rock, and yada yada yada. You're arrested with $17,000 cash and a revolver on you after you've tried to hire a hitman to kill a witness who's going to testify against you who lives in New Jersey. But I digress. So I just wanted to say real quick on the follow-up of this, people on Facebook are talking about the general improvement, or the Western Arkansas Planning and Development District, which is the one that's been laundering the general improvement funds at the request of legislators. And they're just saying, you know, hey, look, this whole process is corrupt. And it is. It is. And we cannot pretend that the system was in place to get around the Supreme Court ruling. Just a reminder, before the Supreme Court ruled this year on the unconstitutionality of general improvement funds, they had ruled a couple years ago that you couldn't do it. You couldn't, give money to legislators to have the legislators then decide where it goes, because that's not right. And the legislators really enjoyed it. They really liked having that power. So they then said, well, we'll funnel them through planning and development districts, and then the planning and development districts will award the money, but the legislators, just all they have to do is send an email, and they get to steer and they get to direct where the money is going. It's a clear pattern. It was a way that they got around the Supreme Court ruling, and now the Supreme Court comes back again and says, oh, by the way, this new scheme is unconstitutional. I just want to establish that as a fact, that the legislators get to decide who gets their share, their cut of general improvement fund money. Whether you're a state representative or whether you are a senator, you're the one that gets to decide where the money goes. So, anyway, I'm sorry. Somebody's texting me saying I misspoke and I said the wrong word. Hang on a second. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I said the Western District. I meant the West Central Arkansas Planning and Development District. You see, there's so many of them. The West Central Arkansas Planning and Development District. That's the West Central. There's a Western. There's a Western Arkansas Planning and Development District. There's a West Central Arkansas. There's a Central Arkansas Planning and Development District. You see how confusing it gets? And when we're trying to report on public corruption, it just is interesting. But anyway, the whole process, though, is legislators get to decide. Now, just because that's the process, and every legislator does it. Every legislator does it. Even the good ones do it. But the whole process was a way to get around the Supreme Court ruling. And what has it led to? Well, it's led to, among other things, the public corruption trial of Senator John Woods. That's the first, and so here's the thing. If I don't trust any legislators anymore to be able to give this stuff out equitably, and you really can't, because even if you give it out, you're getting somebody's getting a personal favor somewhere, and you're always going to vote for that. It helps the power of incumbency, and that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing for our republic. But if you don't trust legislators doling out money to who they want to dole out money to, why would you trust the governor to dole out money who he wants to dole out money to? Why would you trust him? See, I don't trust any of them. And, the governor, somebody pointed out on Facebook, the governor, all this taxpayer money flying out of Little Rock, he doesn't really care much about that. But he does care about some grassroots citizens and how they paid for a billboard to support Jan Morgan. He does care about that. Priorities on display. So, anyway. We're out of time for this hour. We got one more hour coming your way next. We're going to start at the top of the hour with a follow-up story from conduitforaction.org. And then at the bottom of the next hour at 7:33, we'll be talking with Senator Brian King. Folks, go to conduitnews.com to get the first hour of the program if you missed it, or continue to watch us live over at facebook.com/conduitnews. Sound off. We've got one more hour coming your way next. Don't go anywhere.
Northwest Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
They've got Conduit News that is on multiple stations across the state. It's pretty much an attack machine on what I'm trying to accomplish in this state, and their message is getting out, and no one else's message is getting through.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
To interpret, I think, how you would govern, and being an originalist certainly is good. There is one thing about this upcoming tort reform amendment that the people are going to be voting on, and one of the reasons I don't support it, even though I might support tort reform, is because you mentioned separation of powers. I think it blurs the lines because it's going to give the legislature the ability to set rules of evidence in a courtroom. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that needs to happen, or is that a blurring of the separation of powers, in your opinion?
Well, you got me in a tough one there. You know, that's going to be one that's tough to answer. I will say this: the people of Arkansas, you know, if they vote for this, they will be amending the Arkansas Constitution, and if they amend the Arkansas Constitution, you can count on me to enforce the words of the Constitution, because I think that reigns supreme. I don't have a position publicly on how I feel about that particular amendment, because, like you said, I mean, at some point that will come before the court, and I don't want to have to recuse from that case because I've prejudged it, and that's the thing here. You want a judge on the Supreme Court that understands the independence of the judiciary and doesn't prejudge cases that come before it. You want someone that's going to be independent and judges the cases based on the facts and circumstances of each case and applying the law fairly and impartially to those facts and circumstances, and that's what I bring as well.
Well, and I think that's totally understandable. You're right, and I knew that question might be, you know, difficult to answer because of a future court case, specifically on the separation of powers, because I think if it passes, and I think, you know, we don't know that yet, but I think if it passes, it's inevitable that portion is going to wind up, you know, before you guys at some point. So so how is the campaign going so far? Like, how have you been received? Where are you going? You know, what groups are you trying to talk to? Because, you know, there's a lot of other races going on, and sometimes people forget, hey, you know, we get to elect our Supreme Court judges. That's a good thing.
Well, it's been the campaign's going great. I guess I've really enjoyed it more than anything else, just getting back out and I guess reuniting with a lot of old friends and stuff. You know, that last campaign that I had lasted 18 months. You know, I got in that race in January 2013, and we ended up doing I guess the runoff finished up, I think, June 10th of 2014. So 18 months out on the campaign trail, meeting people and establishing relationships with people that I know and respect and have become really good friends with over the years, and we've kept up with each other during the interim. But when I got in this race and I started visiting some of these folks again, it's been a little bit of a homecoming all over the state. I mean, it's a statewide race. You know, I'm campaigning from Piggott down to Texarkana and from Bella Vista down to Lake Village. I mean, it's a big state, and it's just been kind of an abbreviated one too. I mean, I made my announcement on February 1st, and the election is, 3.5 months later. You know, so it's been kind of nice having that those underpinnings of the last race and everything to reunite me with these folks. But I tell you, on my way back from one of my first events in this, I called my wife to kind of tell her how it went and everything, and I told her, I said, you know what? If I get elected to this, it's going to be an 8-year term. And it's, you know, when you get out here and you start talking to people and everything, you realize that it's real easy with an 8-year term to get disconnected from everyday people. I said, if I get elected to this, and even if I don't get elected to this, we really need to invest our time and our resources into continuing to stay connected to the people all over the state. You know, it's hard sometimes to go back to your hometown and to settle into your law practice or settle into your job and everything, and lose touch, as far as that goes, as far as if you're not intentional about it. And I've been very intentional about trying to maintain those contacts over the last 4 years. And I don't want to get elected to this office and go, hey.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Yeah, so it's hour number 2 of the program. Thank you so much for being with us. We really appreciate you listening and helping us build this Liberty machine. And you have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We just don't want we not only believe in conservative ideas, we believe in them beyond campaign talking points. Like, we really want to see them implemented. And that's why we say this is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Sorry, I'm trying to talk way too fast. Had a little bit too much coffee, I think. Anyway, so we're going to follow up this hour on a story that we started yesterday over at conduitforaction.org. Now, this story is the follow-up to a story which was a fact check. Who is behind the tax task farce? Of course, Conduit for Action has enough respect for the task farce to call it a task force. I do not. Increasing the grocery tax, is it about fairness or simplifying the tax law? So the fact check from yesterday, who is behind the tax task force, we firmly identified that as being the brainchild of Asa Hutchinson, even though we have the governor's nephew and the governor's campaign spokesperson now saying, no, it's a legislative effort. And the reason is because they're talking about raising your grocery taxes. And that's very politically inconvenient for the governor, who's running for re-election and has a campaign or has a primary opponent in Jan Morgan. And so he is essentially saying, no tax increases, no internet sales tax, no gas tax, all things that he's supported in the past. And he's saying, no, I have nothing to do with what they're considering, and they're just talking about it right now. Well, that's not true. There would be no tax task farce had Asa Hutchinson not thought of the idea and willed it to happen. So the follow-up article, the headline here, increasing the grocery tax. Is it about fairness or simplifying the tax law? Now, fairness is in quotation marks. Is it about fairness or is it about simplifying? That's also in quotation marks. Sorry. Who would have thought? Too much caffeine. The Tax Reform and Relief Legislative Task Force released its list of possible tax increases. High on its list is increasing the tax on groceries. They say the lower sales tax rate for groceries is a tax exemption that may need to be eliminated. Conduit for Action has a better name for the lower rate on groceries: common sense. The tax task force is the brainchild of Governor Asa Hutchinson. When he sold his plan to the public, he said, quote, "The goals of the legislative task force will be fairness, competition, simplification, and economic growth," end quote. Fairness, competition, simplification, and economic growth. So how does raising the tax on groceries further any of those goals? You can quickly eliminate it being about competition or economic growth. That only leaves fairness and simplification. But does increasing the tax on your groceries have anything to do with fairness or simplification? No. What could be fairer to the taxpayers than a reduced sales tax on groceries other than completely eliminating the sales tax on groceries altogether? Groceries are a necessity. We have to feed ourselves. Groceries are a necessity. We all must have. They are trying to hit us where we are vulnerable. It goes on. Here is what the tax and spend politicians know. If we have another recession or depression, people will spend less on non-essential items and luxury items, which means the state will get less sales tax revenue. But by taxing groceries, the politicians know the state will have a safe source of sales tax revenue to reduce the impact on government spending in hard times. They don't care that when hard times come, the increased tax on groceries adds to the taxpayer's struggle. They don't care about that. Simplification. Some tax force members have suggested the full sales tax rate be applied to groceries, but create an income tax credit for low-income Arkansans. Conduit for Action writes, please explain how filling out a tax credit on your income tax form is simpler than walking out of the grocery store having paid less sales tax, or even better, no tax. Please explain how that is simple. Maybe the tax and spend politicians think it is simpler because most Arkansans simply would not qualify for a tax credit and the government would simply keep the money. The task farce was never about fairness, competition, simplification, and economic growth. It has always been about distracting voters while working to increase the tax burden. How about this for a fair and simple solution? The members should refuse to go along with this farce any longer and resign from the task farce. Burn. Hey, Joe, click on Conduit. Go to the top of the website there and go ahead and click on it. Go to the homepage. And then scroll down. Scroll down. Keep going. Yeah, click on that article right there. Who said, I do not intend to raise any taxes? Remember this? We covered this last week. Scroll down. Click on that video. Let me hear it. Let me hear that YouTube video there. Here's Governor Asa Hutchinson in 2015. They're asking him about his tax plan. Listen to this.
I do not intend to raise any taxes in my term as governor. My tax plan, which again is designed for job creation, is to make our tax rate more competitive.
Let's start that over.
So my
start
plan
that over. Let me
is
hear that one more time.
I do not intend to raise any taxes in my term as governor.
Stop. Yeah, the word any there is kind of the operative word. I do not intend to raise any taxes. Any taxes. Yet he raised the tire tax. He created a new tax on tires. So you broke that promise. You advocated for the internet sales tax increase. You did create a new digital downloads tax. You advocated for a gas tax increase, Governor. Oh, yeah, look at all this. Oh, yeah, it's right there. Increase the sales tax on soft drinks. Increase the sales tax on candy. Doubled the special tax on new tires. Added new special tax on mounting tires, used tires. Imposed income tax on payments of unemployment compensation. Tried to tax you on the internet. Tried to tax you on the gas. I mean, what else? I mean, honestly, can we? Is there a, now somebody texted. Buddy writes in the key word was intend. People did not catch it. Let me listen to that again. Buddy saying, I do not intend to raise any taxes. Listen.
I do not intend to raise any taxes in my term as governor.
I don't stop there. So I don't know if that gives him an out. I do not intend. Because, this is in 2014. He's running for governor. I do not intend to raise any taxes. Any. That's like, that's very clear. I mean, any is like, it's like shall not be infringed. You know what I mean? Shall not. It's very clear. I do not intend to raise any taxes. And even if you do think that intend, I guess even if the word intend gives him a little bit of an out, well, I did intend to, but the circumstances changed, and I had to raise your taxes on tires, and I had to create a new tax on tires, and I had to do a digital downloads tax, and I had to advocate for the internet tax, and I had to advocate for the gas tax. I didn't intend to, but I had to. I think that still is a tough sell to the people, because I think they, I saw a cartoon. A political cartoon, and it was like it was a milk carton, and you know how they put missing kids on milk cartons. Have you seen this? And it was a picture of a politician. This is the way I feel about Asa. Like, have you seen this man who ran for office? Like, where is he? Where is this guy? Let me hear Governor Asa Hutchinson one more time. One more time. Yeah, one more time.
I do not intend to raise any taxes in my term as governor. My tax plan, which again is designed for job creation, is to make our tax rate more competitive. And so my plan is to focus on reducing the state individual income tax, which is the highest in our region at 7%.
So that's his plan, to reduce the income tax. That's still his plan, by the way, because he's got a primary opponent, and he announced he wants to take it all the way down to 6% now. 6.9 to... He took it from 7 to 6.9. Now he's like, I want to go all the way to 6. So he's doubling down, but he did say, I do not intend to raise any taxes. Any taxes. So that's why it's really troubling that his task force is now talking about raising the grocery tax. And there's other taxes that they're talking about getting rid of, But getting rid of a tax exemption is a tax increase. Now, what they're going to say is, no, but we're going to reduce taxes elsewhere, or we're going to use that extra revenue to then reduce your income tax. And I'm thinking, something tells me if you do it, it'll be in phases. And something tells me you'll have, like, the political will. Like, think about this. I think you'll have the political will. What if they did this? Like, what if it was two parts? They couldn't put it in one bill, and they do one thing. Let's say they raise the grocery tax. They have the votes for that. But let's say that they don't have the votes to cut the income tax. Maybe the Democrats find a way, It's like, oh, well, we raised your taxes, but we couldn't get the... I don't know. You just never know with legislation. You never know with this stuff. And keep in mind, if there is more money that winds up going to the government after your tax reform package, then it's a net tax increase on the people, by the way. If there is less money that goes to the government, it's actually a tax decrease, meaning the tax burden on the people has been lowered. We've got to be able to agree on the definitions of phrases and words. And I just hope, I'm really just sick and tired of not being able to do that. That is the divide in the Republican Party right now, is we don't agree on what the definition of conservative is. Asa wants you to believe he's a conservative. By my definition, he falls well short of that. We're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. This is Conduit News Radio. We're building a liberty machine. Back in just a moment.
This is Mother Government. I come to the people of Arkansas with an important announcement. In disloyal circles, some are questioning the scope and size of government and telling the people government programs should not waste the labors of the people under the guise of taking care of them. This is a thought I must correct. People of Arkansas, you should not believe everything you hear unless it comes from a government source. Let me, Mother Government, set the record straight. You know you can trust me. After all, would your own mother lie to you? You should know the brand new, terrific program known as Arkansas Works has nothing to do with the old, bad program known as the Obamacare private option. Arkansas Works is good. People who say otherwise are bad and are seeking to undermine my collective vision for progress. If these groups continue in their criticism, then you should question their party loyalty. Tell them to quit focusing on this single issue. And then remind them Mother Government says the future of Arkansas depends on this single issue. In my next address, I will discuss the need to prepare your fellow citizens for the next round of revenue gathering that will be needed to continue funding my motherly goals. This message was brought to you by our partner, Aristocrats, serving Arkansas. Thank you for listening, and remember, from cradle to grave.
PHP Parody.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have, let's see, we got about 10 minutes before Senator Brian King will be joining us and for an interview. So stay tuned for that. 7:33, it's 7:22 right now, but at 7:33, we'll be talking with Senator Brian King. Let me see here. We've got a lot of chatter on the Facebook page about taxes. We have Tina. Tina writes that we don't need any more tax on anything, but Asa will keep adding tax. Yep. It seems to be the situation. Karen on Facebook. Appreciate you conservative women listening to the program. Karen on Facebook writing, grocery tax will hurt the working poor. Yep, that's exactly right. No doubt about it. The Conduit for Actions article makes a great point, though. This is a recession-proof tax, meaning we're all going to have to go and feed ourselves, whether the economy's good or bad. And they know that. And so that's an issue. That's a big issue. The question is, we have primaries coming up. Are we going to be fooled again?
It's a Paul Harrell parody.
When the politician starts, he says liberty's on the march, but the marble palace.
All right, well,
the shore has its way.
Just start it over.
And the voters
is it going good?
who believe realize they've been deceived when words are weighed next to deeds. Asa doesn't care about our Constitution. His conservatism is an illusion. Line item vetoes and higher taxes. We all voted for him once, but he won't make spending cuts. Let's all vote and say, hey Asa, we won't get fooled again. The carefully crafted talk puts the people into shock. Once the light of truth exposes all the lies. With the nephews in control and the criminals on parole. The only thing the people can do is vote. Asa doesn't care about our Constitution. His conservatism is an illusion. Line item vetoes and higher taxes. We all voted for him once, but he won't make spending cuts. Let's all vote and say, hey, Asa, we won't get fooled again.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Yeah, so the whole thing here is, I mean, won't it just be good to make an, to not be fooled again? I feel like that's the key here. I mean, I don't even care, honestly. I mean, I do care, but I mean, however the primary race between Jan Morgan and Asa Hutchinson turns out, however it turns out, I am just thrilled to have another candidate to vote for. You know what I mean? That we have a choice, and this is why Republican primaries are such a good thing. They're such a good thing. And in Arkansas now, a Republican primary is essentially your general election. And that's the way it was with the Democrat Party for the longest time, because Republicans didn't have a chance, and Democrats, for the most part, really don't have a chance either in Arkansas now. So, I'm thrilled. I mean, think about it. When I was talking with Hannah Webb on Friday, Asa is making this big pivot to the right. He's now saying he wants to cut the size of government by 50%, which, reducing state agencies by 50% doesn't mean a reduction in government by 50%. It doesn't really mean there's any less money being spent. It just depends on how, again, what's the definition of words and phrases. But, I hope that actually happens, Like, I hope Asa supports conservative causes and doesn't try to walk on eggshells around the corporations when it comes to bills that that want to be proposed and debated. I hope he doesn't do that anymore. I hope he actually governs the way he's campaigning now, and I hope that happens if he is to win a second term. I have my doubts. I'm not going to be fooled again, but I mean, we can try to be optimistic about it. He certainly. Here's the thing: Jan Morgan's candidacy means that Asa has to pivot to the right. And when Asa pivots to the right, he is acknowledging that he's not who he said he was. He's acknowledging us. When every time Asa pivots to the right and tries to make these election year, puts on these election year shows or press conferences or whatever, or Facebook posts or Twitter posts about how conservative he is. I mean, for example, he said that we have constitutional carry, but then he defined constitutional carry from a legal standpoint is inaccurately, trying to save the Arkansas State Police's budget. Now he goes on radio and he says, but if we need to absorb the cuts to the Arkansas State Police budget, we can do that. I mean, he is pivoting so far to the right. And when doing so, he is acknowledging all of us. And he is saying, yeah, we have a much more conservative state than I have actually governed. That's what he's saying, that we have a much more conservative state than the way he is leading us by pivoting this far to the right. It's so transparent, too. He's not even trying to hide it. I think the type of political maneuvering Asa Hutchinson is doing might have worked in the 90s, It might have worked when he was, really being educated in Washington, D.C. about how to be a politician. But back then you could be transparently disingenuous in your political positions just because you're running a campaign, and a lot of people just kind of accepted it back then. I don't think they do that anymore, partially because of the internet and the way information can flow so easily, right? Yeah, and people are just sick of it. Anyway, we've got Senator Brian King coming up in 3 minutes. Back in just a moment.
it's hard sometimes to go back to your hometown and to settle into your law practice or settle into your job and everything, and lose touch, as far as that goes. As far as if you're not intentional about it, and I've been very intentional about trying to maintain those contacts over the last 4 years. And I don't want to get elected to this office and go 8 years or 7 years before I'm running for re-election again, and all of a sudden look up and say, "Oh, I got to get back out there." I mean, I think that you have to be very intentional to stay grounded with the people that are out there and the voters of Arkansas, and that's what I intend to do.
Yeah, most definitely. And, it is such a powerful position being on the Arkansas Supreme Court. You guys are kind of the last stop, or are the last stop when it comes to Arkansas. And there was some talk, I guess, couple of years ago, maybe I guess in 2016, there was talk about maybe going away from the direct vote of the people and moving toward an appointment process. And I'm wondering, what do you favor? Do you like the system the way it is, having to get the approval of the people to become a judge, or do you think it would work better with some sort of appointment process where political officials decide who the next Supreme Court judge is going to be?
Honestly, I'm completely comfortable with the existing system of elected judges. I mean, there's pros and cons no matter which way you go. I mean, you want independence in your judiciary, but at the same time, you want there's to be some accountability. And I think that elections really give you the most accountability in all your public officials, including judges. And so, what we have here is kind of a blend here in Arkansas, where we have some really long terms, where appellate judges are elected for 8-year terms. It's not quite a life term like it is on the federal level, but, eventually the justices have to face the voters and answer to them and see if the voters have decided to go in a different direction. And that's what we're facing here in this particular race.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. We've been talking with David Sterling. He's candidate for Arkansas Supreme Court. I'd love to talk to you again soon, David, and best of luck to you, sir. And I appreciate you running. It's good anytime somebody throws their hat in the ring. That's a good thing.
Well, thanks, Paul. I just want to let your listeners know that the election is actually May 22nd, for judges. That's actually our general election. Everybody else, it's their primary election. A lot of people skip the primary and go straight to the November election, but if you do that, you're going to miss out on the opportunity to vote for your judges and prosecutors and other nonpartisan positions. And, my faith informs me in all my decisions, and I promise to serve the people of Arkansas with honor and integrity if elected, and I'm asking for your listeners' vote on May 22nd.
All right. David Sterling, candidate for Arkansas Supreme Court. We appreciate it, sir. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. I appreciate it, too.
All right.
Paul.
Folks, good morning to you. Feel free to send us a text.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us here. Joining us, we have Senator Brian King. He's a senator for District 5. He's running for re-election in the upcoming primary. Senator King, thanks so much for coming on, sir.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Glad to have you on. Hey, I just want to get your reaction real quick because there are some new developments. Of course, the public corruption trial of John Woods commenced yesterday, and they're trying to pick a jury and that sort of thing. But last week, I mean, a big development in that case where you have Orrin Paris changing his plea from innocent to guilty. What's your reaction?
Yeah, and I want to say, Paul, I mean, it came out yesterday. To my surprise, I had not been contacted by either side, so it was a surprise to me. But out of the 160 people listed as potential witnesses, my name was one of them. And like I said, it was a surprise because I have not been contacted by either side on this.
Well, the distinction,
I have no connection to the college or steering money towards it or anything. So I really don't know. Like I said, really don't know what that's all about.
Well, the distinction there, they list the politicians in the article this morning who did steer money to Ecclesia College, and then they specifically list people who did not steer money to the college.
That's right.
And your name was on that list with some other people.
Yeah,
so.
and I was chair of audit during the time of whenever we did the audit of the Economic Development District and so there were several things. So I guess we'll just wait and see. I've not been subpoenaed. I know other people have been subpoenaed. And I talked to some others on that list. There was at least 4 or 5 on that list. that we talked to, that I talked to, that didn't steer money like the others to the college or was involved with them, and they had no knowledge of it too. So it was kind of surprised. So
yeah,
but yeah, on the news last week, yeah, I mean it was just it was just Orrin Paris was innocent, and then last week he pleaded guilty.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's the intermediary, if you will. I mean, in the case, he's the one that we're using this consulting firm as a money laundering operation, but the college has got to pay for the consultant, and that's where the kickback that's where the kickback scheme actually happened. So let's talk about Medicaid disclosure, for example, because this is really where this is all headed. I mean, I know it's a general improvement fund scandal, but, the reports are that the FBI is now looking into Medicaid and people making all this money and on the side. And, you had Linda Chesterfield, who was, now she's come out and said she was a consultant for a year with Preferred Family Health Care. You have Rusty Cranford, who, attempted to have a guy killed. I mean, it's just crazy how where all this is heading. And you have been on the forefront, Senator King, trying to make legislators have to disclose if they're getting money from a Medicaid provider.
Yeah, even going back several years, back before even all this stuff was coming out, you just started wondering about why are these Medicaid entities having so much influence up there. And, it just became a concern. You'd see votes that happened that you thought, now, this is a no-brainer. Okay, this is thing, and it wouldn't even stand a chance. I mean, it was just, thing after thing, and then all of a sudden you start seeing the other things come out in the newspaper, just like Michael Lamoureux and, Gilbert Baker with Faith and Freedom, where they, funnel money to an organization that then turned around and hired him as a consultant. And it just became that no matter what the headlines are, down there in the inner part of Little Rock, it was like, it's not even existing or happening or a problem, but yet you could see out in the headlines it was, and you just see legislators continually to protect, let's just say what they said. I mean, call it what it is. It seems to protect what we know. The key is what you're seeing now, and some of them that are saying, oh, I don't do this or I don't do this. Well, what was happening back in 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, okay? What was happening in those years? And I even filed a bill in legislative council that went back past years to try and disclose, and so that was shot down too.
So I'm curious. I mean, you say that there was stuff coming out in the headlines, and it just didn't matter. It didn't kind of penetrate that bubble at the Marble Palace. But it sounds to me like what I'm hearing you say is that the way people were behaving was just suspicious. And I'm curious, when you decided to run your Medicaid disclosure bill for transparency, and of course you've tried to run it several times, you tried to change the rules, you tried to actually run the bill, was it just your personal suspicion, or was it something else? And were there other people and colleagues that you would talk to that you guys were like, hey, something weird's going on, something fishy's going on? What really was it that made you say, you know what, we need to try to disclose if there's something nefarious going on?
Yeah, I think there were several, there were some bills and stuff, but if you look at when I came into office, we spent $3.145 billion on Medicaid. We're spending well over $7 billion now and continuing to go up. So the amount of Medicaid dollars that we are spending is going up. And if you look at our state budget, once again, the $172 million proposed increase, that's if the money comes in next year, once again, 130-something million of the increase is going to Medicaid. 3-4 times the amount that's going to education. Once again, we're seeing that, crime and those things that would make our community safer is being neglected at a time that crime is getting worse and worse and worse. Just look at Pulaski County. And you see these little, topical ointments put to that type of wound, like, more money to county jails for, to house inmates. Well, that's not bad, but the problem is we just closed 2 prisons because of staffing, reality money. So, I talked to a law enforcement person last night that just said that, there's habitual criminals in their communities that they're so frustrated at that they can't lock up. Once again, you look at all the increases that we see. We need money for highways. Guess what? We can't have money for highways because of all these Medicaid. And so why are we continually increasing at an unsustainable rate? And, Paul, we've talked about this multiple times. This is what frustrates the establishment down there so much is that when you go out and say the truth, they come out and say this total lie that, well, I was going to spend $100 million more next year, but now I'm only going to spend $50 million more. So I saved you. We're having savings of $50 million. Okay, that's not right. That's just a total lie.
Yes.
I mean, we're spending record amounts of money, and so it's all in Medicaid. I mean, I've just been down there so long that it's just the last few years, and we continue to give more billions to these big insurance companies.
Mm-hmm. So, and there's no way of knowing, how many people are really caught up in all of this. But I think you hit the nail on the head. If we were spending $3 billion on Medicaid, and now we're spending $7 billion on Medicaid, it's the difference between those two numbers that I think, I think it's not rocket science why we have a corruption problem going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, the more money we're handing out in Medicaid, and in, like I said, you see these entities have these special, interests that they have of seeing such and such happen. And when you read the plea agreements of some of these people, you've been down there, you can see what's happened and how they did it and how they set it up. And that's why you have some of the guilty pleas, you have some of the upcoming trials that's coming on. And, it just gets back to, and it's even past that, Paul. It has to do with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Once they passed the private option, big Medicaid, big insurance company subsidy in 2013, a few months later they hired Jonathan Dismang's best friend as a lobbyist. I mean, that kind of cronyism, to say the least.
Yeah.
The former legal staff of Governor Mike Beebe, then as soon as he got out of office, guess who he went to work? Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Wow.
And now he's the chief lawyer there, making no telling how much more money than he was when he was in the government sector.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have these situations come up like this, and you go out and talk to the regular people, and they understand it and they get it because these big insurance companies are literally taking advantage and raping the citizens out here on health care costs because there's not that many of them. They know they're the only game in town. They've got the Little Rock and legislators down there having their back down there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the simple truth.
We're talking with Senator Brian King. You've been following the task force. I call it a farce. They're talking about eliminating exemptions, and which is a tax increase. And I know they'd probably say, well, we want to cut taxes here and, do kind of a tax shifting shell game. But I got a feeling when it's all said and done, there's going to be more money going to the government. They're going to try to sell it to everybody as a tax decrease. But, if there's more money going to the government, and like you've just outlined, Senator King, we're kind of in a budget crisis, and they need more money to keep this gravy train going without it having to admit that they've mismanaged our money, and it all does go back to Medicaid. So what are your thoughts on the task force on taxes?
Yeah, it's just another thing, how they've mismanaged the budget and spent more, and now they've got to kind of try and figure out ways to, creative ways to get more revenue. The thing about it is the governor talks about, and these leaders talk about how much they're saving and everything like that. We're spending more than ever. What they don't want to talk about is that no Arkansas governor during the time he's been in, or this leadership, has taken in more tax dollars. We're spending record amounts of tax dollars. And they have to go out here and look at these exemptions, and probably some of these exemptions need to be looked at because, quite frankly, they're probably special interest. That's how they got in there.
Right.
But yet, on the other hand, what doesn't get touched is back to Medicaid, and the spending part is the big insurance companies are protected in this whole thing. The big Medicaid entities, like the nursing homes, they're protected. Oh, they'll go out and say this or that, but reality is, if you keep looking at the spending and the amount of money we're getting, we're spent $5 billion on these insurance companies on this Medicaid expansion, and we haven't improved the overall health ranking of the state of Arkansas. Okay, you would think, we're sitting here, Paul, and they're laying off 200 people at UAMS. And no one wants to talk about it down there. laying off people at UMS is going to dramatically affect our health care here in Arkansas. I mean, it's our only medical school. It's like our medical school is having a stroke, and yet legislators and the governor failed to recognize that and failed to do anything about it, and now you've got layoffs out there at a time we're spending record amounts of Medicaid dollars lining the pockets of these big insurance companies. It just, blows my mind.
Wow. Yeah, that is it's crazy. You ever get frustrated? I mean, you've been against Medicaid expansion this entire time. It's you always, and a lot of your Republican colleagues used to be against it. I mean, I think about some of them that used to say that Medicaid expansion would gobble up the entire Arkansas budget back when they were against it, and now, of course, they support it. And I guess I'm wondering, are they ever, when they come to raise our taxes, I just don't think they're going to be honest with us and say, well, it's because we need money for a welfare program. I think eventually they'll just keep taking money from prisons or keep taking money from education and get to the pain point, and then they can say, well, we need to raise taxes for education, teachers, or fire department, or law enforcement. That's what they do at the local level. So, I mean, that's pretty frustrating, right? I mean, it's got to be frustrating.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it's a shell game, because the raise the taxes part, our percentage of this match rate that is continuing to go up, and now at a time when we're taking in record amounts of tax dollars, we should be running right now, somewhere between $250 and a $400 million surplus right now, easily, with the amount of money that we're taking in and the amount of things that could be done to actually reduce spending. We should be running that kind of surplus, which would give us tremendous amounts of money for highways, fight crime, that stuff, but we're not. And it is very frustrating to see the rubber stamping process and the budget process down there, where they came in there. And I put out on Facebook the other day, and I mean all your listeners out there, their increase in spending proposed this next year, over 3%. I'm like, are workers at the local plant out here, are they getting a 3% raise? Mm-hmm. No. Farmers in my district, are they getting a 3% raise? No. I mean, they're having to do, work harder, pay more, and do with less. At the time down in Little Rock, they keep having to raise the spending. I mean, teachers in my district, did they see a 3% raise? So, it's very frustrating to see what goes on, and the fact that all of a sudden we're in this great financial shape right now. And the other thing is, too, when you look at the amount of federal money that we're spending in this Medicaid and keep going, if anybody's concerned about the debt and the deficit, it's not Washington, D.C., it's also these legislators that keep raising that. And then they talk about fiscal responsibility. I'm still trying to figure out how you have limited government. You don't have limited government by spending record amounts of money. I mean, if we just, the last Democrat governor spent far less than what has happened over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean, it just, like I said, when I came in 2007, Paul, there were a lot of Democrats on the committee that were business people. They sit there and I learned a lot from them, and they grinded the budget down. They methodically thought about things. Well, if you add this cost this year, in 4 years, where are you going to be at and how are you going to pay for it? That was the questions that asked that doesn't get asked today. That is exactly why Governor Huckabee, through his leadership, and some members of the General Assembly at the time, sit there, and we were spending $1.6 billion less, and it produced almost $1 billion surplus.
Wow.
So right now, this bunch is spending $1.6 billion more and have almost no surplus.
Yeah, what you're essentially describing is an environment where, when Democrats had control, they were more fiscally conservative than our Republican majorities are now. I mean, that's what is going on.
Back in back in 2006 and 5 and 7, yes, that was the case.
Gosh. So this kind of dovetails into our whiteboard this week. Our whiteboard says we want honest government, and when we get to this point, I mean, I'm talking about, like, even if you are an honest liberal, and at least you're honest. And I'm not talking about you, Brian. You're obviously a conservative, but you know what I'm saying? It's at this point, it's like we're not debating. In the leadership right now, we're not having the debates of limited government. We're not having the debates of how much should we cut the government, or should the government stay the same size. They're doing the opposite of that. But in the context of the public corruption now that is coming out, I mean, we kind of have to we got to get the government in order before we can address the policy positions, I think, that we all want to see implemented down there, the Republican reforms that we want to see implemented. We got so much public corruption that's unfolding. I mean, we just got to have an honest government first before we can, start to work on some of these policies. What's your response to that?
That's right. I've said all along, this Medicaid influence down there is way too powerful and has their hooks in people. As I mentioned, some of the others, and just in the cronyism alone with this big insurance scam, Medicaid expansion. So, they are so tied and hooked into that. Until we get a clean Medicaid debate, and I don't know what it's going to take to get that, until we get a clean Medicaid debate, we're not going to have substantial tax reductions like we had in 2007, which was the largest tax-cutting session in Arkansas history. We are not going to have the money for highways and to fight crime until we have a clean Medicaid debate. And just like Representative Ballinger last week on your show said that he had voted for Medicaid disclosure. Representative Ballinger just needs to come out and prove where he actually voted for that, because I don't ever remember he voted for it. And he continues to say things like, well, if I would have, if Senator King would have just worked, and basically what he's saying is, I think lawyers deserve special privileges. That's what he's saying. I mean, he just keeps coming around and he filibusters it out. But, Paul, you know what? No, I don't think lawyers deserve special privileges in this whole debate. If somebody wants to come out here and buy a cow off of a Medicaid entity for $50,000, you know what? And I'm voting on billions of dollars of Medicaid, I should have to do it. If somebody walks in a Medicaid entity and a lawyer or a law partner, that's how everything kind of gets, confusing when you have partners and stuff like that and whatever. But, if they come in there and want to do that, I mean, look at Jake Files getting $80,000 wired to him by nursing home. No one asked any questions about it. Okay, Jake Files voting on billions of dollars of Medicaid. Jake Files gets a $30,000 loan from a lobbyist, and it just seems like nobody questions. But Representative Ballinger, when he said that he's supported Medicaid disclosure, I think he needs to step up and prove where he actually voted for that, because there has been no time at all that he hasn't done anything other than think lawyers deserve special privileges.
Wow. Well, Senator Brian King, we're out of time, sir. I appreciate you coming on the program, as always.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
All righty. Have a great morning. Folks, we got to take a break. Back in just a moment.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
This is Mother Government. My people. The promised revenue gathering to fund my motherly goals, such as the Arkansas Works, Obamacare, private option has commenced. I have asked my representatives and senators to execute my will concerning new revenues from the tires you use to drive on my roads, the candy and sodas you consume and purchase in my stores, and the digital products you download on my internet. Your sacrifices and tributes, which are owed, display a measure of obedience, but there are still collectible sacrifices I require from the people to increase the work and size of our great government of Arkansas. There are 2 matters left unresolved. 1. I require a general tribute for all purchases made on my internet. Not just digital products, but all products. My dear children, there are those who would thwart my motherly goals of progress. If you see them, please combat their misguided notions of freedom by using phrases like mom and pop, and tax cheat. 2. I still require more revenue sacrifices concerning your consumption of my gasoline. I require your undying loyalty on the subject. Subjects, in conclusion. More revenue is good. Static revenue is bad. This message was brought to you by your stewards, aristocrats serving Arkansas. Thank you, my children, in advance for your required and expected obedience that keeps society safe and prosperous. And always remember, from cradle to grave.
PHP Parody.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I think our good friend Gene McVeigh over on Facebook has summed it up perfectly. Summing up the broadcast perfectly. We need to have Gene back on ASAP. He says, Asa thinks he can tinker with Arkansas when the whole political culture must be reformed. That is exactly correct. It is. There's a lot of people that think you can just work around the edges. We did say work around the edges, but it's more like let's just tinker with it when we've got to have a complete upheaval of the culture down there. And it's because of the shadow of the Clintons. Okay? It is the shadow of the Clintons. It is a bureaucratic system and government that almost put 2 Clintons in the White House that started their career. Arguably the most powerful political family on the planet. Maybe not anymore, but arguable. It's an arguable point. And they got their start, and they learned what to do right here. And they left a mark. It is important that you understand they left a mark on this state. And so you can't tinker around the edges. People have voted for Republicans because of the reforms that's in the platform, and now all we have are excuses from Asa and the leadership and the nephews for why it can't be done. And it's just a bunch of circling the wagons, trying to protect this and that, trying to protect the carrot. And, folks, what we are trying to do on this program is just tell you the truth, let you make your own decisions. I have faith that if people know the truth, that if the light is kind of shined in the darkness, the light exposes the darkness, and people will make different decisions at the ballot box, not just for this election or the next election, but just we'll start to see, hey, look, we need a government that more accurately represents the people. And right now, we can't even talk about policies right now. We got to talk about an honest government. Can we just get an honest government where they don't take taxpayer money and funnel it through consulting firms so that they can get a kickback, or funnel it through a college so that they can get a kickback, or funnel it through a Medicaid entity so they can get a kickback? Can we get lobbyists that just want to lobby for their own industry instead of try to have people killed in New Jersey? Come on, folks. Arkansas, be safe.